Hello and welcome to Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. My name's Dylan Jackson. Today, I'm joined by Jacob LaQuire. Jacob, how you doing today?
Was doing a lot better yesterday. A lot better around 1:05 p.m. But some fantasy football good play can make up for my sorrows from the 1 o'clock window.
Yeah, it was a rough day for us being Panthers fans specifically. We had significantly higher hopes than what we got for Bryce Young, Dave Canales, that team. Obviously, a 30-0 win last week. So this week it was kind of the opposite, and honestly, a worse loss than that was a win, at least in terms of how I feel about it. But we don't have to spend too much time on the Panthers. It was a very, very depressing game. We have a lot to cover today. You can follow Jacob at Jacob LaQuire, myself at dj.png. You can follow the show at 2p_conversion on Twitter. You can follow it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts as well. 2pointconversion.com. You can subscribe to our newsletter. We've had a ton of content over the past few weeks. I wrote about coaches that are probably going to be at the top of the list for most teams making a change. Panthers might want to take a look at that list after today. We'll see. But we're going to cover a few of the major games. I think we'll touch on most, if not all of them from today. But we're going to start with the Los Angeles Rams beating the Indianapolis Colts 27-20 in the late window. Jacob, what were your initial thoughts on this game? How it went for the Colts, how it went for the Rams? A.D. Mitchell, I kind of feel for him. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, that's the first thing, right? He did the classic let go of the ball too early. I don't understand why that's still a thing, like it was a decade ago when that was a main issue and it's still happening. But the Rams played very, very well. Puka Nakua got his first receiving touchdown to cap off. I think it was 170 receiving yards in that game, like 10 receptions or something. Very, very good day for him. I thought the Colts had their chances, right? Obviously, you start and end the game with interceptions to Cam Curl, Daniel Jones did. But throughout the game, it was still close. And at the end there, if Daniel Jones doesn't stare down, I think A.D. Mitchell was the intended receiver. It might have been Pittman. If he does a little bit of movement with his eyes, I don't think that interception occurs. But I think it proved that, number one, the Rams are a legit, real contender in the NFC. Their only loss being to the Eagles. And then it also proved to me that I think the Colts are still a good team. They just shot themselves in the foot in this game. After the two turnovers and there's a fumble, it still ended 27-20. Like they were in this game.
They were definitely in this game, and really it was the first game that Daniel Jones really looked mortal, if that's a good way to put it. Like the Rams, their defense was taking advantage of a lot of his mistakes. Obviously, I want to talk about the A.D. Mitchell thing because that was a real turning point in the game. Like the Colts would have taken a lead with that play. It was like an 80-yard pass, catch, and run. Would have been a touchdown. And honestly, it was the most impressive reception of the day if you exclude the last 3 seconds of it. First of all, the ball skills to make that catch with one hand and then find a way to maneuver around not just one but two defenders and get into the end zone, but obviously didn't get into the end zone. That was incredibly impressive. It's just a shame that it didn't quite end the way that A.D. Mitchell maybe intended. It's kind of it sums up his career in the NFL so far, I think, pretty well. Unfortunately, like obviously he's an electric receiver, very, very talented. Just hasn't necessarily gotten the opportunities, and when he has, he's squandered it just a little bit. But I know they're still excited about him. I know he's a very talented player. It'll come around eventually for A.D. Mitchell, but it's just a really unfortunate way to lose this game. I think that play kind of single-handedly turned the momentum a little bit for this team. So the Colts, I feel bad in a way because it really was like that play turned a lot of things, and it's something that shouldn't have happened. But kudos to the Rams for taking advantage of many of the mistakes that the Colts had. I think the Colts, they fumbled the ball. I think they lost one fumble, but they put it on the ground like 2 times. Daniel Jones threw 2 interceptions, both to Cam Curl. Jonathan Taylor looked a little bit more mortal as compared to the previous few games that we've gotten from him. And then obviously you mentioned Puka Nakua is electric, 13 receptions, 170 yards, and one touchdown. So that Tutu Atwell touchdown at the end really sealed the deal for the Rams, but it's a really unfortunate way to lose for the Colts.
For sure, and you mentioned the fumble and putting the ball on the turf quite a bit. The Rams' pressure up front really affected Daniel Jones. Jared Verse, really, really good player. I think he was the one to strip Daniel Jones on the one on the 2 minute drive. Bernard Raymond, the left tackle, jumped on top of the ball, but it put him from a 1st and 10 on the, I think it was the 35-yard line to like a 2nd and 19 on your own 24 or 26, which that is a hard deficit to climb back from, and eventually that drive ended up leading to the final interception. So I think the pressure that the Rams are able to apply with that front is special in the league right now. But I still have concerns about the back end, like their defensive backs. Obviously, Cam Curl had a very, very good game, but the corners weren't playing. I don't want to say they weren't playing their best ball. It's like it's a hard matchup for such thin corners to go up against guys like Tyler Warren, and Michael Pittman had a touchdown in this game. And that was one of the keys that we talked about on Friday when we recorded. But ultimately, it's the pressure that the Rams are able to apply that got them the win.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at how this Los Angeles Rams team has kind of built their defense, you could tell the emphasis is all in their front five, really, with Jared Verse, Byron Young, Kobe Turner, Braden Fisk, Puna Ford. Those are all incredibly good football players. And Jared Verse, in particular, being the leader of that unit, is like, he ran over the center today at one point, and it was like probably the most dominant interior defensive lineman rep that I saw personally throughout the day. Incredible football player, and he's only getting better. But yeah, I mean, when you look at like Quentin Lake, when you look at Darius Williams and Emmanuel Forbes being two of the main corners on this team, I'm just not sure how much you can really expect to keep up with a receiver room that has so much talent. Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, obviously A.D. Mitchell, who's been improving despite his mistake today, and then Tyler Warren as well. Like the linebackers and safeties are not well equipped to cover Tyler Warren. So he had, I think it was like 5 catches for 70 yards, something in that range. But you can really tell the strengths and weaknesses of this LA team. They were very pronounced today.
Yeah, and you saw it 2 weeks ago too with AJ Brown, how he was able to kind of dominate the corners. Dallas Goddard in that game as well. That's like the sticking point of that defense. But if they can continue to get pressure, the Rams are going to have a chance in any game.
So let's move on to the next game that I wanted to cover. Jackson Dart, in his first NFL start, he beats the Los Angeles Chargers with the Giants 21-18. I think the biggest headline, in spite of the win, is that star receiver Malik Neighbors. It looks as though he's torn an ACL, which is just super unfortunate. He's by far the most electric part of this offense. So I'm hoping the best for him, but it didn't really look great. They've already come out and say that they fear it's an ACL injury. So I'm hoping that's not the case, but I fear that we're done seeing Malik Neighbors at least in 2025. But if all things go well, I hope that he's back on the field for week 1 next year. It's just super unfortunate. But Jackson Dart, 13 for 20 through the air, 111 yards, 1 touchdown. He took 5 sacks. He had 10 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown on the ground as well. What were your thoughts on him throughout the day?
I thought it was as good a start you could have against a Jesse Minter defense for your first ever NFL start. He was all over the field doing like kind of everything, right? The 10 carries stood out to me. And then there were quite a few designed carries, the touchdown being one of them. But a lot of the carries were the result of scrambles, which you love to see. No turnovers, if I'm correct. Or no, he might have had a fumble. But I thought he took care of the ball really, really well. The pass at the end, the little shovel pass there to Theo Johnson was a fun wrinkle for the win there. And like, I don't know, it's very fun and good when your first start is a start where you're not favored to win, you're not expected to win, but you're able to make stuff happen, especially against a very, very good defense without your number one receiver after let's say 48 minutes or 12 minutes into the game, he gets hurt. I don't know. I feel a lot better about Jackson Dart following this win than I did about him as a draft prospect and as a potential starter this season.
And look, you could really tell that Brian Daboll felt incredibly validated at the end of this
Yeah.
game when, there was just this big embrace between he and Jackson Dart as time expired. I think that it's fair to say that this was, I mean, it's not the most impressive stat line ever, but for Jackson Dart to kind of win in the way that he did against a defense that, we were both incredibly worried about Dart going up against the Chargers as the first team that he played because of how good this defense is and is schemed up by Jesse Minner. So for him to go in and gut out a win in the way that they did, it's, I think, incredibly impressive. And I do want to talk about it from the Chargers' perspective because from the jump, really, the Chargers were in a negative game script, right? They had multiple interceptions early on. Dexter Lawrence nearly had a pick six. It was a kind of hilarious
I felt so
interception.
bad for him that he got hawked down there at the end.
I know. Yeah, but I mean, immediately, right? First drive of the game, 3 and out, 3 plays, 3 yards. Then they kick it off to Jackson Dart and the Giants. They travel 90 yards down the field and score a touchdown. So immediately the Chargers are in a negative game script. Uh, in the first quarter, still they have that turnover that we just mentioned, near pick six to Dexter Lawrence, and then kick a field goal off of that. But it just always felt like no matter what, the Chargers were between 3 and 11 points down. So they were never really like in control of this game. And you could kind of tell because Amarian Hampton only got 12 carries. Justin Herbert only carried the ball one time on a scramble for 24 yards. So I don't think the Chargers played this game the way that they wanted to. And for the Giants to kind of take advantage of that was incredibly impressive. And I know that we have kind of been down on the Giants, as we probably should be. I mean, they've been a really poor team over the course of the past several years, really. But they nearly beat the New York Giants. I think they kept the Chiefs game competitive for at least a little bit, and now they come back home and they are able to knock off the Chargers, who had an undefeated record. They'd beaten the Chiefs, the Raiders, the Broncos. So incredibly impressive win for the Giants.
Yeah, and as much credit as Jackson Dart should get, the defense, like you're talking about, especially the defensive front, was very, very impressive. The
Yeah.
Lawrence, it was a self-created interception. Like he batted it up and then bobbled it to himself and returned it almost 40 yards back to the house. Herbert got him there at the end, and then Brian Burns was all over the place. He sealed the game with a like a pretty significant sack, 10+ yard sack on Herbert there. That defensive front, we said it coming into the season. Everybody lauded them as being one of the best, and they're showing it so far. I'd like to see a little bit more of production from Abdul Carter, but other than that, like that front's very, very dangerous.
Yeah, I think this might have been one of, if not the best game that we've gotten from Brian Burns in a Giants uniform. Only had one sack, but had four QB hits. By the way, Tui Pelotu on the other side, 4 sacks and 5 tackles for a loss. So incredible game from him. But yeah, I think Brian Burns, he was very effective. It seemed like every play he was able to take advantage of a Chargers team that was missing both of their tackles by the end of this game. So um, we'll see what the injury is on Joe Alt. It sounded like it was a little bit more minor than what Malik Neighbors suffered, but yeah, it was a very impressive game for this New York defense as a whole, but especially Brian Burns, I think.
And like the last point I would make is how many times do we need to see stuff happen on that MetLife turf before
Yeah.
something happen, like it's replaced or it's upgraded? I don't know. It seems like this is a yearly occurrence where we see multiple significant injuries on that turf.
It's often. It's very often. And I do want to point out, by the way, Quentin Johnston, is he just like really good now, do you think?
Yeah, he's a legitimate receiver and like somebody that you would expect to get from a first round pick. He was like the 22nd pick or something in that year. He's a very, very good player. But we talked about it coming into the year that if anybody could figure Quentin Johnston out, it would be Harbaugh, the guy he played against in college, the guy he lost to in the college football playoff. TCU beat Michigan that year. Quentin Johnston was all over the field in that game. So I thought that it was a natural, good marriage between the two, like to be able to extract the latent talent from Quentin Johnston, and he's showing it. Like he was wide open on the, I think it was the Burns sack that ended the game, where Johnston was wide open, could have
Yeah.
had like a 30-40 yard gain there. He's playing very, very, very well, and it wouldn't surprise me if I don't know if he can get consideration for like comeback player of the year or anything, but he's certainly going to play into a Pro Bowl level season if he keeps this up.
Yeah, he's been everything that I expected Lad McConkey to be so far this season. Lad McConkey, by the way, only one catch for 11 yards. I think that's one of the worst productive games of his career so far. But Quentin Johnston, I'm super excited. I talked about him on the solo pod last week, but very, very happy and excited that he's doing good things after just the amount of negativity around his first year in the NFL. So good player. I'm excited to watch him moving forward. But let's move on to the, for me, it was an 8:30 game. For you, a 9:30 game. The Steelers in Dublin beat the Minnesota Vikings 24-21. I know you've wanted to talk about Aaron Rodgers, so I'll let you take the floor.
Well, it's a bit embarrassing. I forgot that the game was going on until about 10:45 my time, and I turned it on, and the Steelers were kind of whooping them. Rodgers was impressive, but if anybody got a game ball in this performance, it had to have been Kenneth Gainwell. It was definitely the best performance of his career so far. He was the featured back after Jalen Warren was announced to be out at right around 4:30 a.m. If you're a big fantasy football person, that's when the tweet came across the timeline. But Gainwell, excellent game. I thought the defense played super well. I do have questions about the decision by Mike Tomlin there at the end to punt
Yeah.
instead of you don't even need to sneak Rodgers. They had a successful tush push with a tight end. You could have done that again with a 4th and inches, but it ends up being like no consequence, that decision, and they get the win. They get revenge, or Rodgers gets revenge rather, on the Vikings who beat the Jets last year in England. Rodgers was obviously on that team, so I bet he feels good to beat them, not in the UK, but right across the strait there in Ireland, and get an international win.
DK Metcalf did things in this game that George Pickens simply was not capable of. They're just very different receivers. And I think DK Metcalf is the type of guy that's really optimized for this type of Arthur Smith, rack type of routes that they try to design open. That's why they traded for John Smith as well. But yeah, I mean, Aaron Rodgers he played incredible and super, super efficient, 18 for 22, 200 yards and a touchdown. Only took 2 sacks. I think it was Jalen Redmond, the defensive tackle, got both of them, if I'm not mistaken. Former Panther, by the way. He was in the 2023 camp for Carolina, but I digress. Kenny Gainwell, you mentioned he was incredible. I was lucky enough to pick him up at like 7:30 a.m. this morning and stuck him in the lineup where Trevion Henderson was my starter. So we'll see if it continues for multiple weeks, but I imagine that Jalen Warren will be back sooner rather than later. But yeah, the Steelers are 3-1 right now, and they have a very winnable 2 games in front of them between the Cleveland Browns at home next week, followed by the Cincinnati Bengals a week later. So after that, it gets more difficult. They play the Packers, Colts, Chargers. Actually, I think this Steelers team has a bye week next week. So,
Yeah, they do.
Those 2 games they will happen within the next 3 weeks, but they're coming back from international travel, so they get the bye. So, the Steelers team 3-1. They'll be 3-1 until October 12th against the Cleveland Browns, but they've had a very exciting start to the season so far, minus some Caleb Johnson miscues.
And that 3-1 is an important number because, as we saw maybe 30 minutes ago, the Baltimore Ravens dropped to 1-3. The Bengals obviously aren't going to perform well as long as Jake Browning is playing at the level he plays at, and the Cleveland Browns lost again today as well, so they're 1-3, I think. They have a chance to get a pretty substantial lead going into the halfway point of the season.
So let's talk about the Tennessee Titans losing to the Houston Texans. The final score of this one was 26-0. Cam Ward, 10 for 26, 108 yards, and a pick. That's not the best. Woody Marks, our guy, we've been super high on him at the 2 point conversion, both from a fantasy and real life perspective. 17 carries, 69 yards, a touchdown. He also had 4 catches for 50 yards and another touchdown through the air. The Titans were outgained 353 yards to 175. So the Texans had more than double the amount of yards that the Titans did. That's certainly not good. And I think we got another Brian Callahan masterclass here.
Maybe a disaster class, I think, is the correct term.
Yeah.
Calvin Ridley again, just absent. Io Manor was the main guy there that Cam Ward was targeting, but I think the stat line is obviously it's alarming when you see 10 for 26 and 108 yards and an interception. But this is also one of the best defenses in football right now, and I wasn't expecting him to have a master class, so to speak. Right, I think it's fine to be bad against one of the better defenses in your fourth ever start when you also probably have the worst roster around you in the league. Um, I think I'm much more impressed that the Texans were able to shut them out. That might not bode well given what the Panthers did the following week after a shutout, but getting 26 to nothing, I think Stroud looked much more stable. Like he wasn't rushed.
Yeah,
He was
for
able to
sure.
find open receivers quite a bit. And I think the best part of that was Woody Marks being a like an actual positive in the run game. The Texans O line wasn't like a great wall or anything this game. There's actually a clip out there right now of Jeffrey Simmons beating the center legitimately instantly. And
Yeah.
he's touching Stroud at like the half-second mark following the snap. I think it's the fastest sack in the last 15 years or something. Next Gen Stats did a post about it, but it's like the problems were still there for the most part. But I think having a legit run game off of Woody Marks' back is a good way to mitigate a lot of the issues.
I as weird as it sounds, I almost think this game has more takeaways for the Titans than it does the Texans.
For sure.
Obviously, it's great for the Texans to get on the board with a win, especially when you have the Colts lose. You're only 2 games behind in that division at this point. And I just looked at the Houston Texans' upcoming schedule, and it is brutal. They play in Baltimore next week. They play in Seattle the week after that. Actually, they have a bye week, but after the bye week, they play in Seattle. After that, they play against San Francisco 49ers, the Denver Broncos, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars. So that's brutal. That'll take you all the way until mid-November. Like that's the next like obvious win to me, and that's again against this Titans team. So they desperately needed this one. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to salvage their records still. Like it's a really rough start this year, and it's been disappointing for sure for them. But with this Titans team, I say that I think there's a little bit more that you can take away because it looked like they had completely quit on Brian Callahan. The effort level, not only in just the fourth quarter, but throughout this game, it looked completely lackluster. And I think it's a team that knows what's kind of going to happen. If not in the near future, then definitely at the end of the season.
Yeah, the successful plays were a result of them just being better than whoever was guarding the person, right? Like Jeffrey Simmons is better than all of the Texans O linemen. That's why he got
Right.
that sack there. And when that's the brunt of your good plays, that's never a good sign. We mentioned it when we were talking about like college prospects, right? How you have to give effort in your. We were talking about Peter Woods in regards to effort and the Clemson D line. When it gets to the pros and that's happening, I think it's less on the players and more so on the organization, like the coaching staff, especially when the entire team is doing it. And Brian Callahan is somebody that we've speculated could be one of the first coaches fired. I believe you had to take that within the next 2 weeks, we might get a coach fired. And I think Callahan was the favorite among the lot there. Yeah, it's rough. I don't know how the Titans are going to be able to come back from you expect to lose, but losing 26 to nothing is really rough.
It's really bad. And just like to give some perspective, the number one receiver on the Titans so far this year has been Alek Ayumanor, who's like a late fourth, early fifth round pick this year. That's not typically what you want to surround your first overall pick with at receiver. And the Calvin Ridley signing hasn't worked. I think Tony Pollard's been largely fine, but if you look at the offensive line and kind of what they've done with those moves, I don't think I don't think it's an understatement to say that Dan Moore has been like super disappointing. Like he's been maybe like a bottom 20 offensive tackle as a starter so far this year, which it sucks when you give somebody like, what was it, 4 years, 80 million. It's just not what you want when that's like your big money signing in free agency. So I feel bad for Titans fans because they have to they have to watch this week in, week out. But good for the Texans. It's only going to get harder from here, though.
Yeah, you mentioned Dan Moore, the left tackle. JC Latham, when he's been out there, has probably been even worse. Their right tackle, who was the seventh overall pick a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken. That was like
Yeah.
the big thing about, obviously, other than drafting the first overall pick, their big thing in free agency was an entirely retooled offensive lineman. They brought in Moore at left tackle. They brought in, I think, Kevin Zeitler was the right guard. J.C. Latham was able to move back to the right tackle. Skoronski was able to move to, or he stayed at left guard. And Lloyd Cushenberry, who they signed a couple years ago, was back from IR. So it was supposed to be different, but just hasn't turned out that way.
Yeah, it's been unfortunate, and that J.C. Latham pick, I was super hesitant at the time, and I know he's gotten better throughout his year plus in the NFL, but I don't think his trajectory is that of one you would be comfortable with selecting in the top 10, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, it was kind of odd at the time. There's been a trend of, and we mentioned this during the draft process, of how the highest right tackle or highest graded right tackle kind of goes ahead of where they might supposed to be going in
Yeah.
the draft. Like we saw with Darnell Wright a few years ago with the Bears, who I think has been a serviceable starter, certainly not worth a top 10 pick. So I think teams just it feels like you're drafting for need at that point, and that's not really something you want to do with your offensive line. Like when you draft an offensive lineman high, they need to fit your system and be very good. It's not like you should take this person because you need them.
The fact that the Titans have spent 80 million plus on Dan Moore, a top 10 pick on JC Latham, they signed Lloyd Cushenberry to a massive deal. They spent a first round pick on Peter Skoronski. Kevin Zeitler was like 1 year, 10 million. The fact that they've done all of those moves with the offensive line and it's still looking how it does, I think that's an indictment on the coaching staff and obviously the higher ups that are making personnel decisions as well. So it's unfortunate. Like Roma Dunze, I'm pretty sure was the pick made right after JC Latham, which if you're the Titans, you probably want that one back right now.
Well, two picks after Michael Penix would have been the pick,
That's right.
who played
Yeah,
much better today than he did 2 weeks ago.
he did. He did play much better. But the next game we're going to talk about, Jacksonville Jaguars. They moved to 3-1. Good for them. They beat the San Francisco 49ers. It was a pretty close game. What were your initial thoughts on this one?
Maybe they rushed Purdy back a little bit. I felt like he was never in a rhythm. They were getting
Yeah.
pressure, or the Jags defense was getting a lot of pressure. There are four total turnovers, three of them coming from Purdy. There was a strip sack to end it there at the end of the game. McCaffrey is McCaffrey. He's incredible. But a lot of the throws Purdy was attempting, I don't even want to say making, were just out of the reach or like very, very high throws where guys like Kendrick Bourne or Ricky Pearsall had to make impressive catches to keep the drive going. Um, like, I don't know if Mac Jones was able to play or if he were healthy, but it seemed like Purdy was pretty clearly a net negative in this game for the 49ers.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Like it's his first game back. Didn't look the best. Obviously, like three turnovers is never going to look great. I almost thought it was more impressive that the Jacksonville Jaguars had. I think it was let's see, they took the ball away 3 times from the 49ers. They didn't turn the ball over at all, so they had a +3 margin. Again, they have the best turnover margin in the NFL so far this year by a pretty wide amount. But the fact that the 49ers were even in this game despite that turnover deficit kind of says what their offense was doing. Like Trevor Lawrence wasn't making the best of decisions. Brock Purdy, I think there were multiple throws in this game that he could probably wish that he, obviously, other than the 2 interceptions, that he would want back. McCaffrey, he had kind of a slow start, but got really going towards the end of the second quarter and then never really looked back from that. And then it's like the receivers for San Francisco just keep getting hurt, right? I think Ricky Pearsall got hurt in this game. Juwan Jennings, there was a moment for him. Obviously, they're missing Brandon Ayuk. So the weapons department is kind of lacking, I think, outside of McCaffrey at this point for San Francisco. But yeah, Brock Purdy, I think, was a pretty clear negative to me. And I do want to mention on the other side for Jacksonville, their offense, it looked better, I think, today than it has the past 2 weeks, I would say. Trevor Lawrence, I said he made some pretty bad decisions, and he did. But Travis Etienne, I think it's fair to say at this point, with how well he's played over the course of this year, that last year was maybe a year that he was probably affected by injuries more so than maybe what the public consensus on him believed. 19 carries, 124 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground, and then a 48-yard run as well. So he was incredibly impressive today. Brian Thomas looked a little bit better. Travis Hunter got more involved in the passing game as well. So this Jacksonville offense, I think, is still, I mentioned it last week, they're still figuring things out. But I'm very excited to see where it goes from here, because I think Liam Cohen has been phenomenal in just not only his game management, but the play calling as well.
As long as they get the run game going, this is a very potent offense. I don't want to call them a very good one yet until Lawrence really locks in and cuts back on the mental errors. But Travis Etienne has been a revelation. You mentioned maybe injuries affecting last season. I like coaching probably affected how last season went as well. Talking about people quitting on the team, Doug Peterson kind of like quit on the team himself last year, or that's how it felt at least. But
Yeah,
Etienne's off to a really, really good start. I want to give credit to the 49ers defense, though. Fred Warner was playing like a man possessed. He was
for sure.
everywhere. He was the reason that they were able to be in the game on defense. He was batting down passes, making key tackles behind the line to gain. Very, very good player. And I think with Roquan Smith's regression this past 4 games, and he got injured in that game as well, I think Fred Warner is back to like the top dog at the linebacker spot.
I think he broke the 49ers record today for most forced fumbles throughout the, like 49ers franchise history, I'm pretty sure. I could be completely wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure I saw that stat somewhere today.
They
Um,
said it on Red Zone. Do you know who the guy who held it before him was?
oh, they definitely said his name, and I 100%. It wasn't Navarro Bowman, was it?
He played with Bowman.
Willis?
Yes, Patrick
Yeah,
Willis.
okay. Yeah. I knew it was one of those two. It had to be for sure.
Yeah, that was a crazy
Incredible,
linebacker group that with Alden Smith too, rookie Alden Smith, one of the best ever.
incredible player. Incredible defense too. Like that was super, super fun 49ers team back in the day. But we're going to move on now to the panic meter. So we're going to grade these teams on a scale of 1 to 10 based off of how panicked we are about them. And we're going to start with the Baltimore Ravens. They are 1-3. They have 1 win against a pretty bad Browns team, and then 3 losses to, I would say, pretty good teams between the Lions, the Chiefs, and week 1 they lost the Bills as well. So how panicked are you about the 1-3 Baltimore Ravens?
So I typed 9 in our notes here. I'm going to go 8. The thing I'm most worried about, and it was revealed with the Lions game last Monday, the offensive line just had no answers for the Lions pass rush. And the Lions pass rush is pretty good. They were very, very good again today against Cleveland, but no answers. And then Without the answers, Lamar Jackson wasn't able to make plays in that game, and he wasn't able to make plays in the Chiefs game today when he was on the field. He left with a kind of a nebulous injury. They eventually called it a hamstring, but he was on the bench for a good 15 to 20 real life minutes before they mentioned what that was. If he misses time, my panic meter goes up to 11 with this team. But even with Lamar Jackson in the backfield, there are a lot of concerns with this team. I mentioned Roquan Smith got hurt in the game. Nate Wiggins, who was their first or like corner one, also was carted off in that game. This team's been just struck down by injuries, and even before that, there were concerns that we saw in a lot of their losses. So I'm gonna say 8 right now. If a tweet comes out about Lamar Jackson potentially missing time, that's going to go up to a 10.
It felt like a fake injury almost a little bit just to, take him out of the game. This wasn't really a competitive game in the second half, really. But yeah, he really didn't look like his normal self, and it's been pretty consistently this year that it's kind of felt that way. So I'm pretty panicked. I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I still think like it's Baltimore. They have so much talent. I have to wait and see. But if things continue, if he does miss even a short amount of time, like their upcoming schedule, the Ravens, they play the Texans, Rams, Bears next. That's their next 3 games. So, not exactly the easiest schedule in the world if there's going to be a recovery time here. But yeah, it's been disappointing so far. The defense, in particular, I think it's fair to say, like, they've obviously struggled against the run. I think they have one of the worst run defenses in the league right now. And then Derrick Henry again looked pretty unimpressive in today's game. Again, it's a negative game script, so um, can't say too much there. But it's been 3 games in a row now where he's looked pretty just inconsistent, I'll say. Yeah, I'm pretty worried about them, but I just have to wait and see a little bit longer for Baltimore.
Hopefully, they can bounce back next week. I think you said the Texans are their next game.
Yeah.
That would be if that game goes like if the Texans go in and win that game. I think that would reveal a lot of concerns about the Ravens because they need the wins as they come for the next 3 or 4 weeks.
There will be a lot of takeaways about that game regardless of who wins, I think.
That's fair.
The next team that we're going to talk about is the Minnesota Vikings. They're 2-2. They lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers today in Dublin. How panicked are you about this iteration of the Minnesota Vikings post Sam Darnold?
I'm gonna say 4 out of 10. I'm a little bit less concerned, even with the loss. They sustained 6 sacks. Wentz just wasn't playing at we'll call it MVP caliber Wentz when he was back with the Eagles, and still it was a one-score game. They had a chance and get the win. Obviously, weren't able to, but I think as talented as Kevin O'Connell on the offensive side of the ball and managing the team as a whole, and how he's able to get really good play out of quarterbacks. I think whether it's Wentz or McCarthy, he's eventually going to get them to a competent starter level. So I don't have a ton of worries on the offensive side of the ball. Jordan Addison also came back today and he looked fine. So I think the weapons are good. I think the O line's fine when Darius How's in there. And then the defensive side of the ball, as long as Brian Flores is there, they're going to be electric. They're going to be hard to beat. Dallas Turner was finally getting involved today. Like, I don't know. I'm just not as concerned with this team because I trust the organization, I guess, more than some of the other teams that have sustained losing records so far.
So I am concerned in the sense that this division is top tier. And I think this team might struggle a little bit more to get wins than what I initially might have thought. I also think like this offense really struggled to move the ball before the Steelers went into just a shell defense trying to make everything underneath. Um, which I think that's my main concern here is that they really struggled to move the ball in the first 3 quarters of this game. 6 points before the fourth quarter where they scored 15 on, I think it was 3 separate drives. Carson Wentz, 30 completions on 46 attempts, 350 yards actually, with 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, and 6 sacks. So I think my main worry here is the level of quarterback play that we're looking at from the Minnesota Vikings, because Carson Wentz, despite that stat line, I think he was maybe worse than what that 2 touchdown, 2 interception line looked like at the end of this. And you look at what JJ McCarthy has done through 2 weeks, and that's not the most impressive thing either to me. So I get that he made it work with Sam Darnold, but I think if you're playing in a division as tough as the NFC North is, and your offense looks like this, I get that they have Brian Flores, but I do struggle just a little bit with this team to see, where are they going to get to 10, 11 wins?
I'm worried about the division for sure. The Packers and the Lions are two of the best teams in the NFC. I just, I don't know. Like he's made it work with Kevin O'Connell's made it work with so many different quarterbacks who, at the time, or at the time that they joined the team, I wouldn't have said that this quarterback is a viable starter. And then they go in there and they work it out and they leave the team and are like Kirk Cousins was good before he got hurt in Atlanta last year. Sam Darnold's off to a blistering start this year. And I think they have the talent to support even poor QB play. We saw that in week one. Week one's a little bit fluky. If you would have asked me this question after week two, I think I would have been more concerned. But even then, in the loss to the Falcons didn't score a touchdown, despite McCarthy
Yeah.
turning it over 3 or 4 times in that game. So I guess I just trust the surrounding cast. But the reason I'm at a 4 instead of a 1 or 2 is because the quarterback position.
Okay, with that, we're going to move to the last team on the panic meter, the Las Vegas Raiders. I'll go ahead and say I'm pretty worried about them. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Geno Smith does not look like the same player that he has been in the past. I think he has 6 total interceptions over the last 2 games. Just he hasn't looked like himself. At least the Geno Smith that we got in Seattle. Ashton Genty finally got it going, but this offensive line, despite that, is really bad, and it looks like it's only going to get worse as Colton Miller I think he was carted off in the final few minutes of this game. So I'm pretty worried. I think the offensive infrastructure is pretty rough. Brock Bowers hasn't looked like himself since an injury in week one, and the defense just doesn't really have the talent outside of Max Crosby to get it done.
So I was at a 10 before today. The only reason I'm, I guess, lower than a 10 is because Ashton Genty finally had the breakout game. He was incredible. He looked like the star he was when he was drafted at 6th overall. I'll say 8, like I did with Baltimore. Geno Smith, like you said, very, very concerning. Um, in Seattle, he was kind of like a safe player. And when he would test the field like deep over the middle, it was generally accurate. And I know he doesn't have a guy like Tyler Lockett, who's one of the best deep ball receivers over the last couple of decades, but I don't know. Like it feels like he's not seeing the field as well as he did in Seattle. The offensive line gives me worries. Chip Kelly hasn't really designed advantages for this offense, if that makes sense. And like you said, Bowers not being at 100% clearly is affecting this offense because they can't open lanes in the run game when the defense doesn't have to worry about credit to guys like Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers, but they don't have to worry about those guys taking over a game like fully healthy Brock Bowers would.
Yeah, it's tough because I like so many players on this Raiders offense. But yeah, I mean, Geno Smith, 14 for 21 today, 117 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. That's just not where you need it to be, especially against a Bears team that's been so up and down early this year. So the Raiders, I think it's fair to say, like they're 1-3 at this point. Their upcoming schedule, they play the Colts next week, followed by the Titans, Chiefs, and Jaguars. So not the easiest upcoming schedule outside of that Titans game, but I think that Colts matchup is going to be pretty revealing. So let's move on to grade that take. Jacob, you've got a pretty spicy one to kick us off.
So right now, and I'm giving that caveat, right now, Mac Jones is the best quarterback on the 49ers roster. I'm not even going to take win-loss into account because that can be deceiving, right? Like a team can support you in wins, but in both of Mac Jones's wins, it seems like he's actually elevating the team or at least doing enough to get the win, whereas Today, Purdy just didn't look like he had it in him. Week one, Purdy, he did get that final touchdown there against Seattle, but he threw an interception, and Reek Woolen just let Tonjes take it from him. Um, and I say right now because it doesn't look to me like Purdy is 100% healthy following the injury he sustained in week one. And if he's not the guy that he has been, or I'll say that he was last year, because I thought he improved quite a bit last year. If he's not at that caliber of player, he's a replacement level quarterback. And that's what Mac Jones has been the last couple of years. Except I think in the Shanahan system, Mac Jones can distribute the ball a little bit better than he was able to in Jacksonville or in I don't even remember who the play caller was in New England when he was there. But yeah, that's going to be the take. Mac Jones right now, as long as Purdy's not 100% healthy, is the best quarterback on that roster and should start until Purdy's 100%.
Oh man, I look. I have nothing against Mac Jones, but I can't see it. I still think like I know that Brock Purdy made some mistakes today. I know that he didn't look like he was fully healthy. I will say I think that as long as he's in a place where he could start, I think he probably should because I view him as a top 10 talent at quarterback when he, is a full go and is capable of starting. And I know it didn't go well this week. I get it. I don't think Mac Jones is very good, to be honest. So I'm gonna give this one a D. I just if it were like a backup quarterback that I liked a little bit more, I think maybe I just view Brock Purdy higher than most people. But yeah, I'm not seeing this one as much as maybe some other takes you've had.
I think that's where the disconnect is. I don't think of Purdy as like a top 10 kind of quarterback. I don't think he's really an elevator of talent. He showed a little bit in 2024, but again, he falls within the Shanahan system. And even with McCaffrey injured, the running backs get yards. Even without Brandon Ayuk, you still have George Kittle, Debo Samuel to get stuff, make stuff happen for you, I guess. I don't know. Even when he's fully healthy, I can't get to top 10. So, like I said, I'll probably like 14 to 16 is like a healthy Purdy for me. And when Mac Jones is in that system, I'm not saying he's a top 14 to 16 quarterback, but I think he's been about as effective, if not more, than what an or injured Purdy has been through the first 4 weeks.
Okay, it's understandable. I realize why you have this take, and to be clear, like if things don't get cleared up for this 49ers team quick, like their next two games are kind of a gauntlet. They play the Los Angeles Rams next, and I think they play another team currently in the playoffs after that. So, yeah, it could get really rough if they don't get things shaped up quickly. My first take that I had, I think Drake May might already be a top 10 quarterback. And I know the stats, they may not reflect it, but he's kind of just really consistent for a player of his age. And I think he's very clearly the best player on this New England offense as well. Today, 14 for 17, 203 yards, 2 touchdowns against Carolina. He really didn't even have to do all that much as Carolina just kind of self-imploded on its own. But so far this year, he's averaging just under 250 passing yards a game, 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and he's been pretty good on the ground as well. So he did a little Cam Newton celebration today. So it made me, even though like it was against my team, it's Cam Newton, whatever, it made me a little bit happy to see that, knowing the history of Drake May's kind of career so far. But yeah, I think he's already like approaching pretty high status in the NFL.
Was Drake May doing the Superman celebration to honor Panthers Cam, who he grew up watching, or Patriots Cam, who was the quarterback there 5 years ago? I think that's the question we should be asking. But I'm going to give it an A plus. Like after the top tier of quarterbacks, and that's like the usual suspects: Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Herbert, Burrow when he's fully healthy. After that group, I think it's very, very nebulous in that next area. Like Jaden Daniels emerged last year, but to me, Drake May is kind of at the top of that group, like the the second tier, or I guess third tier, if you will, because the first three quarterbacks are in their own group. But yeah, he's already a top 10. Like coming into this game, he was top 10 in EPA per drop back, top 10 EPA per play. While he didn't impress me in this game. I'll say that because you mentioned Carolina just let them score, let stuff happen. I thought he took care of the ball. He did everything he needed to, and he's certainly, in my opinion, the best of his draft class, like of all the QBs in his draft class. Jaden Daniels is injured, so we'll have to see with him. But I think May's coming along a lot more smoothly than Caleb Williams, Michael Penix. JJ McCarthy's also injured, but he was someone I was high on even in the draft process, and I think he's proving myself and a lot of other people right why he should have been one of the top people. And he was one of the top players taken, but he was the third quarterback, so that's always going to be a debate. But I'm going A plus. I think he's already a top 10 quarterback in the league.
He's very good. Very, very good player. And I have kind of the utmost confidence that he's the franchise guy in New England. They view him that way. And I think they're going to do their best to build around him. What was your next and final take?
At right now, Puka Nakua is at worst wide receiver 2 in the entire league. And he may not be there in terms of like total talent with a guy like Justin Jefferson or like the yak ability of Jamar Chase, but he is so put together and does everything at an incredibly high level, other than get a lot of receiving touchdowns. He got his first receiving touchdown today. It's hard to keep him out of the top 2 receiver discussion for me. It's not Jamar Chase's fault that he has Jake Browning throwing to him right now. It's not Justin Jefferson's fault that JJ McCarthy and Carson Wentz are throwing to him. I don't know who else I would consider in that. CeeDee Lamb is injured at the moment. Malik Neighbors is somebody that's very, very good. But I think out of all the receivers in the league right now, he's performing the best. He's doing the most. And yeah, wide receiver 2 at worst for me at the moment.
I'm going to give this one an A plus. He's on pace right now for like 2,000 receiving yards. That's nuts. And I was shocked when you said earlier that he had his first receiving touchdown of the season. I was super surprised by that, considering he's caught like 45 passes at this point.
He had like a 50-yard rushing touchdown a couple weeks
right.
ago, but this is his first
Yeah.
receiving one, which was the game, or it wasn't the game winner, it was the game tying one today. Tutu Atwell had the 90-yard bomb.
So yeah, like he is a phenomenal football player, and the engine at which the Rams offense runs. He had 13 receiving catches today, 15 targets. He's had over 9 targets in every single game so far this year, and 3 of them had at least 11. So incredibly exciting player. He's incredibly efficient at getting open. Big fan. I'm going to give this an A plus easily.
Would you put him at wide receiver 1 if you had the opportunity? Or are we gonna wide receiver 1 is so tough. Like I think Justin Jefferson's just in his own tier, but given the QB play right now, it's so hard to not put Puka Nakua in that spot.
If we're talking specifically for 2025, I would probably have him as wide receiver 1. If you're making me pick like one wide receiver to start my franchise with, I still go with Jamar Chase probably. Puka would probably be top 4 in that range with him, CD, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. But yeah, I think this season he's most definitely, at least up to this point, wide receiver 1. I know he's had injuries in the past, and I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. But right now, he's wide receiver 1.
As a fantasy holder of Puka Nakua, I couldn't be happier with his first 4 weeks.
Yeah, I traded for him in my dynasty league. I gave up 2 first-round picks to get him, and I do not regret that at all. So he's been amazing. He's gotten like 30 points a game or something like that at this point. So very happy with him. My final take. I think the Commanders might miss the playoffs. They have They're 2-2 right now. Their losses are to the Packers, where they did not look very inspiring. They lost to the Falcons today. Obviously, a backup quarterback in play there, but their upcoming schedule, it's actually really, really tough, right? They play the NFC North this year. Obviously, they have the Eagles in their division. The Cowboys are no slouch. This is a team that, it might not be as great as what we once thought for this team this season. So next year they play, or excuse me, next week they play in Los Angeles against the Chargers. After that, the Bears. After that, the Cowboys, Chiefs, Seahawks, and Lions. So again, none of those are gimmies. And realistically, like the Bears and Cowboys are probably the quote unquote easiest games of that stretch. But again, I think those teams are kind of tough on their own.
And even the Bear, like uh, I've kind of dogged Caleb Williams like to start the year. He's figuring it out. Like the Bears are a tough out at the moment. They just won a pretty tough game there. I think it was in Las Vegas, if I'm not mistaken. But the Cowboys might have the worst defense in the league at the moment. I'm gonna give this an A. I'll say A plus. Coming into the season, when we did our predictions episode, or it might have been even before that, one of the teams both of us were lower on were the Washington Commanders, and it was for various reasons, like a lack of juice on offense and aging defense that lost pieces. But overall, we were kind of down on this team, and to start the season and lose Jaden Daniels at the beginning, obviously a tough break, but even in the two games here, I don't think the team has taken a major step back, but it's also shown that teams like the Atlanta Falcons, who probably comparable in talent, were able to do whatever they wanted on offense, right?
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago, who was it that they played the Raiders, right? A couple weeks ago, and they won that game, but I don't think the Raiders are a very good team right now, to be quite frank. And I don't know. The schedule you mentioned is tough. Coming into the year, I thought that it might be tougher for them. We might see a little bit of a sophomore slump from the team as a whole. And yeah, I'm just gonna go A plus here. There are so many good teams in the NFC right now that it's gonna be hard to break. They're certainly not winning the division unless some major, major unfortunate luck happens for teams like the Eagles. And then even if the Giants play like this from now on going forward with Dart at quarterback, they're going to be tougher. The Cowboys are always going to be a good team, especially when Dak is healthy. So certainly not in the division. And then you're looking at teams like whoever between the Lions and Packers doesn't make it. If the Bears ascend, if the Vikings can get like stable quarterback play, and then all of the NFC West right now are competent teams. So I kind of agree with this that they will miss the playoffs. I'll give it an A plus.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the landscape of the NFC right now, Philadelphia, San Francisco, Detroit, Tampa Bay, the Rams, the Seahawks, the Packers, obviously, I think those are the playoff teams right now. On the outside looking in, you've got Minnesota, Arizona, Washington, Chicago, Atlanta, you can kind of throw in there too, and Dallas as well. But there's a lot of teams that are going to be vying for that, final 2, 3 wild card spots. So it's going to be tough, especially like I don't know how you have been perceiving it, but to me, the Jaden Daniels injury is like it's one that they've kind of been a little bit secretive about. Especially like we didn't even know that he was going to be even questionable after that Packers game until like I want to say a few days before that game happened, if I'm not mistaken. So it's tough. And I think we're both of the opinion that the Commanders team is aging. They've lost a lot of talent via injury so far this year. Bill Krosky Merritt hasn't been maybe what they would have thought that they were getting. I don't know. The run game is pretty weird. He only had a few carries today, but um, yeah, it's concerning, I think, if you're the Commanders at this point. But again, if you get Jaden Daniels back, if you get Terry McLaurin back, I think that combination in particular should be good enough to at least keep the Commanders contending for a wild card spot, if not just outright making the playoffs.
I agree, like in theory, but before we get out of here, let me ask you a question. Do you think there's been a significant drop off on offense? And obviously, they lose Eckler, they lose McLaurin, but between Jaden Daniels and Mariota, through these two games, do you think there's been a significant drop off on offense to where it's like, oh, this is the reason why they weren't competitive in the Falcons game today, or oh, they could have blown the Raiders out even more? My answer would be no, and I think that's even more concerning than if there were a significant drop off.
It's really difficult because I think they're less explosive than they
Right.
were in 2024. But I think down to down they're relatively similar. They got lucky in a lot of games last year, which led to their record being a little bit inflated, I think. And I know they made it to the NFC Championship game. Um, but I don't think that takes away from kind of the inconsistency that their team had throughout 2024. I do worry. I think the run game will get better when Jaden Daniels comes back, but that Packers team down to down completely shut down this Washington offense, and it's been a weird schedule so far because they haven't played a normal game with Jaden Daniels yet. They blew out New York 21-6, and then they lost to Green Bay in a game that they were never really competitive. So if they get Jaden back against LA, then we'll see how it looks. But I'm optimistic that it could look better, but it's a really tough schedule, and I just don't think that they have the talent that they did last year. And even if they do, it's a year older and a team that's already pretty old.
Yeah, next week in LA against the Chargers. I'm looking at the rest of their schedule, and like the favorable games that I would say are like the Dolphins and Giants. They already played the Giants once, but both of those are also away games. So like I don't know. I feel like it's hard to come by wins. They've also sustained like a significant amount of injuries on offense. So it's very unfortunate, but I have to agree that I think they will miss the playoffs this season.
So with that, I think we're going to get out of here. We've talked about most, if not all, the games that took place today. Jacob, do you have anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
I think I'm going to be doing some draft quarterback stuff the next couple of weeks. We'll talk about it on Wednesday or whenever we do our preview pod, but there are a lot of good quarterback performances on Saturday from like draftable quarterbacks. So I want to kind of deep dive some of the performances from those guys.
Dante Moore, QB1. He looks
Yeah.
great. He looks great. With that, we're going to get out of here. You've been listening to Football Talk by the 2 Point Conversion. My name is Dylan Jackson. I am with Jacob LaQuire. You can follow Jacob at Jacob LaQuire on Twitter, myself at dj.png. You follow the show at 2p_conversion on Twitter, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and of course, 2pointconversion.com. So with that, we will be back at some point in the week to talk about week 5. And with that, we will see you then.